We accompanied Oksana to Ukraine. The Maidan Square in Kiev was the fateful setting for a turning point in Ukrainian history. In late 2013, hundreds of thousands demonstrated for a peaceful turn toward Europe. And now, air raid sirens are sounding there. The city is being bombed and threatened by Russian troops. But the people are prepared to defend Kiev.
This war has no rules. And the worst thing is, it's not even about a political conflict. It's about destroying a nation. Increasingly brutal weapons can be put to use, killing thousands or even millions. But there's no way to destroy the people's spirit, their spirit of freedom, and the love of their country.
Oksana is fighting for her homeland. Not a day goes by without her rallying supporters on social media. She feels shaken to the core by Putin's war. For her, everything is at stake. This is about Ukraine's survival, including its culture, since Russian President Putin denies the nation its identity.
Everything he's saying is complete nonsense. Ukrainian culture is thousands of years older than Russian culture, and that's why he hates us. Because there's no way to explain Russian culture without Ukraine.
This is Lviv back in 2021, a cultural hub in western Ukraine. Oksana showed us the Jesuit church, and even then, the armed conflict with Russia was claiming victims.
All these objects, here you see parts of all these weapons, they came from the front line. Here you can see the gallery of portraits of children who lost their parents or fathers in the war. Like here it says, Maria, 3 years old, my father is in heaven. Dear Father, where are you? I want to be in your arms, I want to see you.
Today, thousands of Ukrainians have fled to Lviv, and crowds have formed in front of the central train station. For them, Lviv is the gateway to Europe.
The whole world shares the blame for Putin's total loss of control. Like when we look at how the European Union reacted to the annexation of Crimea. Yes, we're concerned and we're warning Russia, if they don't stop, we'll apply sanctions. But that approach hasn't really been effective, and Putin saw that. And he saw how everyone was afraid.
The Youth Orchestra of Ukraine brings together musicians from the country's east and west. It was founded in 2017 by Oksana Linev with a political purpose. Her aim was to emphasize Ukraine's unity.
It's been a horrible time for me. I'm here in Europe where I can conduct. I can sleep in a nice hotel. I can keep doing my job. But they're all surrounded and blocked. They can't cross the border. Young men 18 and upwards can't leave the country.
Oksana Linev has brought musicians under the age of 18 to the Slovenian capital of Ljubljana. They can take refuge there for now, and workshops and lessons are planned.
The cultural front is at least as important to me as the physical front line. And that's why it's so hard for me to conduct. But still, I understand that we can't give up now. I dedicate every performance, my art, and my job to our fight for freedom. There's been an outpouring of support for Ukraine, but opinions are divided. Is boycotting Russian culture the right path to take?
My heart goes out hugely to the people of Ukraine, and it's heartbreaking. It's a traumatic experience to witness. So one can only imagine what those poor people are going through.
Peace messages on catwalks, highway bridges, and in concert halls, like New York's Metropolitan Opera. Cultural figures worldwide are sending the people of Ukraine a clear message of solidarity.
In many cultural institutions, I'm experiencing an urge to express that what's happening is unthinkable, and it's something that we reject.
Thousands of Russian artists have joined the call for an immediate military withdrawal from Ukraine, including conductor Semyon Bychkov. The musical director of the Czech Philharmonic also called on other Russians to raise their voices in protest. This benefit concert for Ukraine is conducted by Daniel Barenboim in Berlin. The star conductor, who is married to a Russian, warns against general boycotts of Russian art and artists.
We must condemn political events loudly and clearly and distance ourselves from them. But we mustn't allow a witch hunt against Russians and their culture. Any bans and boycotts of Russian music and literature in various European countries awaken the worst associations in me. Of course, nobody can want that. We want to use culture as a bridge. The question is, who do I work with there, and how does the Russian state use it? You should always look at that. If you have the feeling that this could be misused, perhaps you should put it aside for a while.
Many see this danger in internationally celebrated opera singer Anna Netrebko. So far, she has not distanced herself from the Russian president and has been banned from performing worldwide. Valery Gergiev has been sacked as chief conductor of the Munich Philharmonic. The maestro is known to be especially close to Putin. Cooperations with Russian institutions are being cancelled. Museums and cultural institutions worldwide are refusing to host Russian delegations. More and more pop and rock bands are also cancelling tours in Russia. London-based Russian rap star Oxymoron publicly opposes Putin. What impact does that have?
The idea is to inflict so much pressure and pain on the Russian society that hopefully this will lead to a change from within the country, potentially resulting in pressure on the Russian government that sends the message, this isn't acceptable.
International film companies are reacting to the Ukraine war by cancelling movie releases in Russia, like the long-awaited release of The Batman, which celebrated its world premiere in New York on March 1st. But not everyone thinks such cultural boycotts are right.
Personally, I think art transcends, and I think it's important for stories are such a healing force that I think it's important that all people should be able to watch stories.
The Cannes Film Festival wants to continue showing critical Russian films this year. Russian delegations, however, will not be welcomed. Smaller festivals, like in Sweden, are removing state-supported Russian productions from their programs. In Glasgow, even a harmless Russian crime comedy was banned, even though the director is half Ukrainian and takes a clear anti-war stance.
I can understand the logic behind cutting all ties. That's one way of looking at it. But cultural context can also enable us to maintain a thread of conversation in situations where nothing else works.
Building bridges or breaking off connections? A difficult decision for the arts world right now. Two presidents who couldn't be more different, Putin and Zelensky. The opponents and their way of communicating from the point of view of a writer and a filmmaker.
The past days have worn down Maxim Melnik. The Ukrainian-born filmmaker is in constant contact with friends and family. He organizes aid transports and is glued to the news.
Yes, I'm in Berlin, but I'm also in the war. I've only slept 3 hours because I had so much to do and had to organize so much. And of course, you get all the pictures from Ukraine, from your relatives, from your colleagues, from the media. You're always there, even though you're not there physically.
In 2014, Maxim Melnik took part in protests on Maidan Square in Kiev, and now such images.
So this is Kiev, where we peacefully drank coffee not long ago.
In the catastrophe that now rages, President Zelensky has emerged as a heroic figure from one moment to the next. When the actor and comedian was elected to office 3 years ago, Maxim Melnik was horrified. Zelensky was thought to be connected with an oligarch. Melnik could not take him seriously.
I thought to myself, this is really a disaster that we've elected a comedian. What can he do? It's all just populism, and that's how it was. And now that he's at war, he's not joking around. He's serious, and he comes across very differently. And also how he talks, his posture. Now I totally support him, and I'm even proud of him.
On the other side, Vladimir Putin has become one of the world's most hated leaders. Russian writer Vladimir Sorokin lives in Berlin and has repeatedly taken a stance against Putin. He now feels Putin has completely lost touch with reality.
He comes across as a madman. This is the consequence of his absolute power, which he has held for 22 years. Power is a strong drug that is having a very destructive effect on him.
The greed for power in Europe has reawoken, but Vladimir Sorokin believes this attack is the beginning of the end for Putin.
Why is Putin doomed? Firstly, because he started this completely senseless and insane war. The consequences will be destructive for Russia, as it's hugely dependent on the rest of the world for imports and exports. Secondly, it's an immoral war. It's pointless. Assuming Putin will win, then what will he do with the hatred from 40 million Ukrainians?
In his current book, Red Pyramid, Russia is described as a pseudo-country, a pseudo-democracy with pseudo-elections. Sorokin describes lies as Putin's most important means of communication. Putin claims Russia harbors no ill intentions against its neighbors and says that they should not escalate tensions.
Now, even the elites are noticing the tragedy of our country. They are hit hard by the sanctions, but they can't do anything. Putin has broken the wiring. There's no more reverse gear. The situation is hopeless.
But at least there's willingness to help, and these are the pictures. Maxim Melnik has organized a transport of medicines to Lviv and is in contact with Ukrainian hospitals. He continues to collect. The other night, a man called and shyly asked if he could help.
So then I asked him, where are you from? Are you from Ukraine? He said, no, I didn't want to tell you. I'm ashamed. I'm from Russia. Of course, dialogue is possible, but only in such situations, when people understand what has been done there. We then talked longer, and I had to calm him down.
Vladimir Sorokin also emphasizes that there is no black and white in this war.
Not all Russians are Putin.
Sasha Filipenko from Belarus also lived in Russia, but due to his open criticism, he was forced to go into exile.
When the world is turned upside down simply because someone wrote the truth about an oligarch, when a journalist is defamed and threatened as a result, and is terrorized with break-ins and constant noise. When you and your family are psychologically trapped until you break down. Belarusian author Sasha Filipenko describes what it's like to be pursued by an all-powerful force in his book, The Hunt.
You could also translate the title as hunted down, not just hunt, but like a hunt in which you were chased. We normally only talk about journalists when they're persecuted and murdered, imprisoned, or expelled. But there are many other ways to put pressure on them, and that is what I wanted to describe. I wanted to show how this enormous pressure often doesn't only affect them, but also their families. Even those not involved suffer.
Filipenko experienced this himself as a journalist. Today he is forced to live in exile because he criticized the powerful in Belarus and Russia. He is threatened with imprisonment. His family is also suffering. Here in Gothenburg, he reports on the hardships of those who rebel.
We moved to Basel from a small Swiss village, then to Stuttgart, and then to Amsterdam. But my son wants to go back home and keeps asking me when we'll return. We start from scratch every time, a situation that many Belarusians know today. We can't even go to our own parents' funeral if something happens to them.
The Hunt is powerful literature and a true revelation, especially for the sometimes naive West. The description of the mechanisms of persecution, the climate of fear, something Putin enforced on Ukraine with his troop maneuvers even before the invasion. Noise, demonstrations of power, fake news, it's all about intimidation and wearing people down, controlled from above.
These are clear methods for silencing and intimidating people into following and carrying out orders. These methods are used against individuals, but also against the whole society. This is their only means. These methods are inhumane, horrible, and are used in every sphere of life.
For Filipenko, Lukashenko and Putin are like brothers in spirit. Russia is becoming increasingly autocratic, and Lukashenko is providing Putin with a script: the persecution and brutal suppression of the opposition, the establishment of a dictatorship. Russia is still lagging behind, but is catching up fast.
In Belarus, we live in a dystopic, grotesque tragicomedy. And Russia is moving more and more in the same direction. For me, one thing is certain. If you get on this train to Dachau, you won't arrive at Disneyland.
Filipenko shows us that this could all have been expected. The West preferred to look the other way because of cheap raw materials. His stories describe the psychology of repression and revolt. For example, when he writes about an author who ends up in a grotesque court case for posting an empty message online. Charged in a show trial because he mocked the truth and, by extension, the people of the fatherland. Everyone can see the absurdity, but to speak the truth would be too dangerous.
And on top of that, feeling guilty for your homeland by acknowledging the truth. People in Russia do not want to feel ashamed, nor do they want to apologize. Admitting one's mistakes is a sign of weakness in Russia. To avoid this trauma, people prefer not to learn the truth at all.
Living in Russia means being able to close one's eyes, writes Filipenko, a psychological study of the Russian soul, and in a way, of us, too.
Another devastating consequence of the war, Ukrainian artists working abroad can now no longer return home.
The Kyiv City ballet dancers perform masterfully despite their fear. They were on a European tour when war broke out and they became stranded in Paris.
Creating is an act of resistance. It is an act that says to those who want to occupy Ukraine, to Vladimir Putin, here, we continue to look ahead, to look far, to use culture also as a peaceful weapon.
The Théâtre du Châtelet was immediately willing to host the ensemble in residence. The dancers are staying in Paris indefinitely. They're stricken with worry about their fellow dancers who stayed home.
It's a terrible feeling. We're shocked, and we try to connect to our family all the time, during the day, during the night, check news, and I can't explain what I'm feeling because you're in worries all the time.
Amid the anxiety, the chance to continue dancing in France is a lifeline for the dancers.
Being able to focus on work is kind of a bright point in our day when we get to focus on ballet steps and focus on music and something other than the conflict in Ukraine.
Each of their performances is a success and a form of artistic resistance to the war raging back home.
That's it for this edition of Arts 21. We'll be back next week with more reports about the war in Ukraine. See you then.
The destruction of a nation, Iraq.
I didn't think that he was crazy enough to try to invade Kuwait. I thought he was just going to bluster as he normally does.
Kuwait and the consequences.
Like going back into the Stone Ages in some respect.
The second part of our series.
In 15 minutes on DW.
Eco-India, zero waste, a utopian goal for the film industry?
On average, we've seen a shoot generates about 8 to 10,000 kilos every single month.
A bad movie, say activists from Bollywood, and are rewriting the script. Major props, waste separation bins and sustainable materials. Zero waste, a future box office hit?
Eco-India. In 90 minutes on DW.
These places in Europe are smashing all the records. Step into a bold adventure. It's the treasure map for modern globetrotters. Discover some of Europe's record-breaking sites. On Euromax, YouTube, and now also in book form.
This is DW News live from Berlin. Kyiv braces for attack. The mayor of the Ukrainian capital issues a defiant call to residents to prepare to fight as Russian artillery fire reaches the outskirts of Kyiv. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and French President Emmanuel Macron demand an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine during a phone call with Vladimir Putin. But they say the Russian leader is not ready to end the war. Plus, performing for peace as their city prepares its defenses, musicians in Odessa make their voices heard for Ukraine. I'm Wayne Glucraft. Welcome to the program. Ukraine has accused Russian forces of killing 7 civilians trying to flee fighting near Kyiv. Ukraine's defense ministry said Russian troops opened fire on a convoy of people as they tried to escape a village northeast of the capital. As Russian forces close in, Kyiv's mayor is calling on residents to prepare to fight. Shelling has already reached the outskirts of the city.
Fire crews rushed to the scene after a mortar struck an apartment building on the outskirts of Kyiv. The artillery shelling started at around 6:30 in the morning. There are people living in these apartment buildings, civilians. This is a suburban area here. With Russia stepping up its bombardment of Ukrainian cities, including the capital, it's feared more and more civilians will be caught in the crossfire. Satellite images show Russian forces just 25 kilometers from central Kyiv. President Volodymyr Zelensky has promised Ukrainians will put up a stiff fight in what he's calling a war for the country's independence. We have no right to let up in the intensity of our defense, no matter how difficult it is. We have no right to let up in the force of our resistance. The enemy is bringing more columns into Ukrainian territory. The besieged port city of Mariupol continues to bear the full brunt of Russia's bombardment. The humanitarian situation is worsening by the hour for hundreds of thousands trapped without power, running water, or fresh food. In the nearby southern city of Melitopol, which has already been taken by Russian forces, residents turned out to protest against the alleged kidnapping of their mayor and to demand his release. As fighting rages, people in and around Kyiv will be hoping and praying that last-minute diplomacy could still spare them the worst of what has happened to other Ukrainian cities.
As we just saw in that report, Mariupol has endured some of the worst suffering since the Russian invasion began. Constant shelling has foiled attempts to bring supplies in and get civilians out. Ukrainian officials say Russian forces have captured the city's eastern outskirts. Now, new satellite images from Maxar Technologies show the extent of the damage to Mariupol. They reveal artillery craters in fields and fires burning an industrial area. A series of before and after images hints at the extent of the damage, especially to residential buildings. Another pair of images shows a huge crater